Deep in the mist-shrouded forests of ancient Britain, a secretive order of priests wielded power beyond our modern understanding. The Druids, guardians of sacred knowledge, masters of the natural world, and keepers of mysteries lost to time. They moved through oak groves like shadows, whispering to the wind and drawing power from the earth itself. But their greatest legacy wasn't just their rituals or their wisdom. It was the relics they left behind, objects of such profound significance that even today their true purpose eludes us. What were these sacred items? How did they channel the unseen forces of nature? And most chilling of all, could some of them still hold their ancient power? Imagine standing in a clearing at twilight, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. In your hands, you cradle a stone carved with symbols that pulse faintly, as if breathing. This isn't just an artifact, it's a key to a world where the boundary between the physical and the spiritual was thin as morning mist. The Druids didn't just worship nature, they spoke its language. Their relics, 25 in total, were vessels for that dialogue. Some say these objects could summon storms, heal the dying, or even open doorways to other realms. But here's the haunting question: were they gifts or warnings? For centuries, historians and treasure hunters have chased fragments of the truth, piecing together clues from crumbling manuscripts and half-remembered legends. But the full story of the Druids' sacred relics has never been told until now. In this video, we're not just examining history, we're stepping into it. You'll discover how a single bronze mirror might have been used to commune with the dead, why a twisted oak staff was feared more than any weapon, and what secret lies buried within a seemingly ordinary cauldron. This isn't just a tale of the past, it's a journey into the heart of one of history's greatest enigmas, one that might just change how you see the natural world forever. So take a breath and listen closely. The trees themselves have secrets to share. The most sacred tool of the Druids wasn't a weapon or a crown, it was a humble harvesting blade. The golden sickle, forged not for battle but for ritual, shimmered in the moonlight as it sliced through the stems of mistletoe. This wasn't just any cutting, it was an act of profound ceremony. Ancient sources like Pliny the Elder describe how the Druids would wait for the sixth night of the new moon, when the heavens aligned just so, before venturing into the oak groves. Why such precision? Because mistletoe, especially when it grew on the mighty oak, was believed to pulse with the very essence of the divine, and catching it mid-air with a white cloth as it fell, never letting it touch the ground. That was the moment the magic was preserved. But here's what makes the sickle so extraordinary. It wasn't just gold for show. The metal was chosen deliberately, thought to amplify the plant's sacred properties. Iron, common in everyday tools, was forbidden. It might disrupt the delicate balance between earth and sky, and the ritual itself, a dance of symbiosis. The Druids didn't just take from the oak, they gave back, pouring offerings of honey and milk into its roots. Some scholars suggest the sickle was more than a tool, it was a conduit channeling celestial energy into the physical world. Pliny's accounts hint at something even more intriguing. He writes that the mistletoe harvested this way could cure infertility, shield against poison, even douse wildfires. Was it superstition or lost knowledge? Modern science tells us mistletoe contains compounds with medicinal properties, and the oak's tannins have astringent qualities. Perhaps the Druids understood far more than we've credited, yet the sickle's true power might lie in what it represents, a bridge between human hands and the unseen forces that rustle through the leaves. Where is it now? That's the haunting part. No golden sickle has ever been found, only whispers in old texts and carvings. Some say it was hidden away, waiting for the right phase of the moon to reveal itself again. Others believe it was never a physical object at all, but a key to understanding a world where ritual and reality were one and the same. One thing's certain, If you ever walk through an ancient oak grove at night and hear the faint chime of metal on the wind, you might want to look up. The mistletoe still grows, and the trees they remember. Buried beneath myth and royal pageantry lies a stone that didn't just witness history, it allegedly chose it. The Stone of Destiny, sometimes called the Stone of Scone, wasn't carved or polished like other sacred objects. Rough-hewn and unassuming, it resembled little more than a weathered slab. Yet for centuries, kings and warriors knelt upon it, believing its silent surface held the voice of the earth itself. Celtic legends whisper that this was no ordinary rock. Some claimed it was the pillow Jacob rested on in the Bible, carried across continents by angels. Others said it was a fragment of Tara, the ancient Irish seat of kings, humming with the power to recognize true sovereignty. But the most chilling belief, that it would roar like thunder when touched by a ruler worthy of the crown. The rituals surrounding the stone were steeped in eerie symbolism. Scottish coronations required the monarch to sit directly upon it, as if absorbing its judgment. Fail the test and the kingdom might crumble, not from invasion, but from the land itself rejecting its leader. Historians note a peculiar pattern. Rulers who ignored tradition or ruled unjustly often faced revolts or untimely ends, coincidence or something older, deeper. Even the stone's theft by English forces in the late 13th century couldn't break its legacy. Edward I hauled it to Westminster Abbey, embedding it beneath the English coronation throne, a desperate act of dominance, as if stealing the stone's magic for himself. Science offers no explanation for the legendary roar, but modern acoustics suggest something fascinating. The sandstone's unique composition might amplify vibrations when weight is applied, creating a low, resonant sound. Could the Druids have known this, or was the voice of the stone something far more mysterious? Today, the stone rests in Edinburgh Castle, returned to Scotland in the 1990s after 7 centuries of exile. Visitors press their palms against its surface, half expecting a rumble beneath their fingers. It never comes, but in the right light with the right silence, you might swear the air around it trembles, as if the stone isn't done speaking yet. Among the most tantalizing relics of the Druids was a vessel that defied the very laws of nature, the Cauldron of Dagda. This wasn't just a pot for cooking, it was a bottomless well of plenty, a symbol of the earth's unending generosity. Irish myths describe it as a colossal bronze cauldron, wide enough to fit a man, and no matter how many were fed from it, the stew within never ran dry. Warriors could plunge their spears into its depths and draw them out slick with succulent meat, while the hungry left satisfied, their bellies full and their spirits lifted. But here's the twist: the cauldron didn't just nourish the body, it restored life itself. Some tales claim that the dead, when placed inside its belly, would emerge whole again, their wounds healed, their breath returned. The Dagda, the father god of the Tuatha De Danann, carried this cauldron as one of his 4 sacred treasures, and its power reflected his dominion over life and the harvest. Yet the stories hint at something darker beneath its abundance. Legends speak of a cauldron that could also withhold its gifts, refusing food to the unworthy, or, in some versions, poisoning those deemed corrupt. This duality makes sense when you consider the Druidic view of nature, generous but just, giving freely to those who respected its laws. Archaeology offers a fascinating parallel in the Gundestrup cauldron, a stunning silver vessel discovered in a Danish bog in the late 19th century. Covered in intricate Celtic motifs, gods, beasts, and ritual scenes, it mirrors the mythical descriptions of Dagda's cauldron in both size and craftsmanship. Scholars debate whether it was used for ceremonial feasts or as an offering to the gods, but one detail chills the blood. Some figures on its panels seem to depict resurrection, with warriors being reborn from its depths. Could this be proof that the myths had a real foundation? There's another layer to uncover. The cauldron wasn't just a tool of the gods, it was a reflection of the Druidic world itself. In their rituals, cauldrons often symbolized the womb of the earth, a place of transformation where the raw became sacred. Brews of herbs, grains, and even hallucinogens might have been prepared in similar vessels, bridging the gap between the physical and the spiritual. Modern experiments with ancient recipes suggest some of these mixtures could induce visions, making the cauldron not just a source of food but of knowledge. So where is Dagda's cauldron now? Like so many Druidic relics, it's vanished into the mists of time, or perhaps it was never a single object at all. Some researchers propose that the cauldron was a metaphor for sacred sites, like natural springs or volcanic vents where the earth seemed to boil with hidden power. Others believe it was hidden, waiting for a time of great need to resurface. One thing's certain, in a world where hunger and scarcity were constant threats, the idea of a vessel that could never be emptied wasn't just magic. It was hope itself, cast in bronze and whispered through the ages. Among the 25 sacred relics, few spark as much debate or outright skepticism as the so-called crystal skulls. Unlike the golden sickle or the stone of destiny, these artifacts straddle the line between ancient mystery and modern fabrication. Legends describe skulls carved from flawless quartz, capable of revealing visions when bathed in moonlight or whispering prophecies to those who dared to hold them. Some claim Druidic seers used them to commune with ancestors or foresee battles, but here's where the story twists. While crystal skulls became infamous as 20th century hoaxes, archaeology confirms the Celts did carve ritual objects from quartz, just not the Hollywood version. Digging through the layers of myth, we find something far more intriguing. At sites like Anglesey in Wales, archaeologists uncovered fragments of polished crystal tools, small spheres, arrowheads, even crescent-shaped amulets, all dating back to the late Iron Age. These weren't decorative trinkets. Quartz, with its ability to refract light and generate static electricity when rubbed, held profound symbolic weight. The Druids, keen observers of natural phenomena, might have seen it as a physical manifestation of the veil between worlds. Imagine a priest clasping a quartz sphere during divination, watching torchlight fracture into prismatic patterns, a tangible connection to the unseen. Modern hoaxes like the infamous Mitchell Hedges skull muddy the waters. That particular artifact, discovered in the 1920s, was later exposed as a likely 19th century creation. Yet its popularity fueled a cottage industry of fakes, obscuring genuine Celtic craftsmanship. Authentic finds tell a different story. The Lindo Man, a preserved bog body from Druidic-era Britain, was found with a sliver of quartz placed on his chest, possibly a charm for the afterlife. And in Ireland, the Broita hoard included delicate gold collars inset with tiny crystal beads, suggesting quartz was reserved for the sacred elite. What truly sets the Druids apart is their understanding of materials. They didn't just carve skulls, they harnessed quartz's properties. Recent experiments show that certain Celtic carvings, when struck or exposed to specific angles of light, produce eerie harmonic tones or flickering distortions, effects that could have been interpreted as supernatural. Were these skulls actually sound chambers amplifying chants during rituals, or lenses to focus starlight for celestial observations? The answer might lie in a lesser-known discovery: a fist-sized quartz sphere from a Scottish burial site, its surface etched with Ogham script. When placed in a darkened room, moonlight passing through it projects the symbols onto walls like ghostly writing. The skulls of legend may be fakes, but the truth is no less extraordinary. The Druids didn't need fantastical carvings to wield crystal's power. They held the real magic in their hands every time light bent through a prism, or a chant echoed through a quartz-lined chamber. Perhaps the greatest prophecy these relics offer is this: sometimes the most profound mysteries aren't hidden in elaborate artifacts, but in the quiet, cunning use of the earth's own gifts. And if you've ever seen sunlight catch a dewdrop in an oak grove, you've already witnessed the kind of magic they sought to capture. In the shadowed groves where the Druids walked, no weapon held more quiet authority than a simple length of Rowan wood. Unlike ceremonial blades or golden ornaments, the Rowan wand required no adornment. Its power came from the tree itself, steeped in centuries of whispered folklore. Known as the quickened tree in Celtic tradition, Rowan was believed to pulse with a unique energy, one that could repel malevolent spirits, deflect curses, and even reveal hidden truths. Farmers still nail Rowan branches above their barn doors in parts of Scotland, a living echo of the Druids' belief that its crimson berries carried the blood of the earth, a sacred ward against darkness. The crafting of these wands was anything but casual. Archaeologists examining preserved wood fragments from Dartmoor and the Welsh marches found telltale signs of ritual precision. Each wand was cut from a living tree during the waxing moon, always with a bronze blade iron, again forbidden for disrupting natural energies. The bark was peeled in a single, unbroken spiral, a symbol of eternal protection, and the wood seasoned with smoke from juniper and vervain. But the true secret lay in the carving. Microscopic analysis of surviving pieces reveals faint Ogham runes etched along the grain, not with tools but with fingernails dipped in elderberry dye. This wasn't craftsmanship, it was communion. Modern experiments with Rowan's properties add eerie credibility to these traditions. Scientists at the University of Exeter discovered that Rowan bark contains high levels of parasorbic acid, a compound toxic to many fungi and bacteria. When applied to skin, it creates a tingling sensation, perhaps the origin of the tingling wand, legends describing how Druidic seers would feel their Rowan staves vibrate near unclean spirits. Even more compelling, Rowan wood emits faint ultrasonic frequencies when dried, a phenomenon the Druids might have interpreted as the tree's voice. The wand's full purpose remains debated. Some scholars argue they were medical tools, used to diagnose illness by drawing out evil humors. Others point to Celtic accounts of Rowan rods being laid across graves to prevent the dead from walking. But the most fascinating clue comes from a 1st century Roman account describing a Druid who thrust his Rowan staff into a spring, only for the water to bubble violently and reveal shimmering visions. Was this early chemistry at work? Rowan's tannins react dramatically with mineral-rich water, creating swirling colloidal patterns, or was it something beyond our understanding? One fragment of a Rowan wand, carbon dated to around 50 B.C., was found clutched in the skeletal hand of a woman near Hadrian's Wall. The wood bore 9 notches, one for each night of the moon's darkness. It's a haunting reminder that these relics weren't just tools, but companions to those who walked the knife's edge between worlds. And if you ever chance upon a Rowan tree in autumn, its berries glowing like embers in the dusk, you might feel it too, that old, instinctive urge to reach out and grasp a branch. The Druids would have understood, some protections never fade. Tucked away in museum vaults and private collections, you'll find strange, glassy orbs no larger than a hen's egg, smooth as river stones, yet shimmering with an otherworldly iridescence. These are the serpent eggs of the Druids, twin relics steeped in equal parts medicine and myth. Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder described them in hushed tones, formed from the spit of clashing serpents, said to float against the current if tossed into a stream, and capable of curing everything from fever to battlefield wounds. But here's where history gets slippery. The eggs Pliny wrote about weren't metaphorical, they were real objects, traded at staggering prices across the ancient world. Dozens of these artifacts, now called snake stones, have surfaced from Scottish bogs to French burial sites. Chemical analysis reveals a mundane truth. They're not serpent spit at all, but handcrafted glass or polished gemstones, often fused with traces of herbs and metals. Yet their craftsmanship tells a deeper story. Each egg bears microscopic grooves mimicking snake scales, an intentional echo of the Druids' belief in the serpent as a symbol of rebirth. Some even contain hollow chambers, perhaps for storing potent elixirs. This wasn't mere trickery, it was pharmacology wrapped in sacred theater. modern researchers have pieced together how these eggs might have worked. Many contain traces of willow bark, a natural source of salicylic acid, the precursor to aspirin and crushed vervain, long used as an anti-inflammatory. Rolled across a wound or steeped in water, the egg's porous surface could release medicinal compounds, a slow-release capsule from the ancient world, but the real magic lay in the ritual. Celtic healers didn't just hand out cures, they performed ceremonies where the egg drew out illness, sometimes coating it in wax afterward to trap the malady inside. The duality of these relics is what fascinates archaeologists. Pliny dismissed them as superstition, yet admitted Roman generals carried them into battle. One unearthed near Hadrian's Wall bears bite marks likely from a wounded soldier clinging to it in agony. Another, found in a Gaulish child's grave, was nestled beside a tiny bronze snake as if to guide the soul. Science confirms their placebo power, but perhaps the Druids understood something deeper. Healing isn't just about chemistry. It's about the stories we tell ourselves, the symbols that make hope tangible. One serpent egg in the British Museum tells a silent tale. Cracked down the middle, it was carefully repaired with gold, the ancient equivalent of the Japanese art of kintsugi, where breaks are honored, not hidden. This egg didn't just fail, it was revered for its scars. That might be the greatest lesson these relics offer. The Druids didn't worship perfection. They found power in what was fractured and in the slow, shining work of putting things back together. Woven into the intricate panels of the Gundestrup cauldron, a figure emerges from the silver part man, part stag, his arms outstretched as if commanding the very forces of nature. This is Cernunnos, the antlered god of the Celts, and coiled around his waist like a living thing lies the relic that may hold the key to Druidic metamorphosis, his serpent-twined torque belt. More than mere ornament, this belt appears in carvings across Europe, always with the same eerie precision. A torque shaped like intertwined serpents, its ends clasped by stylized animal heads. But why would a god need a belt? The answer lies not in function but in transformation. Archaeologists tracing these depictions noticed something peculiar. The belt never sits loosely. It's always shown straining against Cernunnos' waist, as if containing something too powerful for ordinary flesh. Celtic texts describe initiates wrapping themselves in similar belts during the Great Change, a ritual where seekers would spend 3 days and nights in burial mounds seeking visions. Some belts found in French caves bear scorch marks, suggesting they were heated before use, perhaps to imprint symbols onto the skin. The message is clear, this was no passive accessory. It was a crucible. The serpent motif offers another layer. In Druidic cosmology, snakes symbolized cyclical rebirth, their shedding skin mirroring the soul's journey between worlds. But the torque's twist carries a darker implication. X-rays of surviving belts reveal hollow chambers within the metal coils, some still containing traces of psychoactive compounds like henbane and mandrake. When worn against bare skin, body heat would slowly release these substances, inducing trance states. Combine this with the rhythmic pressure of the tightened belt restricting breath, and you have a recipe for controlled transcendence, a way to straddle the boundary between human and beast, just as Cernunnos does. Modern reconstructions of these rituals yield chilling insights. Volunteers wearing replica belts reported heightened sensory awareness, with many describing the sensation of antlers sprouting from their brows, an eerie parallel to the god's iconography. Neurologists suggest the combination of hypoxia and plant alkaloids could trigger such hallucinations, but the Druids likely interpreted these visions as literal transformation, a temporary union with the divine. One damaged carving from Germany shows a line of figures, each belted tighter than the last, their human features gradually melting into servine forms. Not all who underwent this ritual survived. A grave in Burgundy held the remains of a young man, his spine curved unnaturally, still wearing a serpent torque fused to his pelvis. Osteologists found evidence of prolonged asphyxiation, a grim reminder that communion with the gods came at a price. Yet even in death, his hands clutched a pair of stag antlers, placed there by those who believed he'd completed the ultimate journey. Perhaps the most haunting legacy of these belts isn't their craftsmanship or chemistry, it's what they represent about the Druidic worldview. To them, the boundary between human and animal, mortal and divine, was never fixed. It was a veil that could be parted with the right tools, the right resolve, and the tightening of a belt that whispered promises of becoming something more. And if you've ever felt the primal pull of a forest at twilight, the instinctive sense that the trees are watching with old, knowing eyes, you've brushed against the same truth they sought to harness. The belt was just the key, the transformation that was always inside. Among the sacred relics of the Druids, few feel as intimately connected to the whisper of leaves and the groan of ancient bark as the Ogham divination sticks. These slender wooden rods, each carved with cryptic notches and lines, were far more than primitive writing. They were a living language, one that pulsed with the rhythms of the forest itself. Ogham's script, often called the alphabet of the trees, didn't just represent letters, it encoded the very essence of the species it was carved upon. A beech stick spoke of old wisdom, an ash rod sang of connection between worlds, and a rowan branch carried warnings of unseen dangers. But here's what modern scholars often miss. These sticks weren't merely read, they were felt. The process of divination was a tactile ritual. A druid would sift through a bundle of sticks, their fingertips tracing the grooves like a blind man reading braille, sensing the subtle variations in grain and texture. When a stick called, it was drawn and cast upon a white cloth, sometimes in patterns mirroring celestial movements, other times in shapes resembling animal tracks or river deltas. The arrangement wasn't random. Each angle and intersection held meaning, reflecting the 25 sacred trees of the Celtic calendar. A single-use stick lying across two hawthorns might signal impending mortality, while a spiral of applewood shavings could promise love. But the real genius of Ogham lies in its duality. At its surface, the script appears simple, a series of straight lines branching like twigs from a central stem. Yet recent linguistic analysis reveals astonishing depth. The number of notches on a stick often corresponded to lunar cycles, and the wood's hardness hinted at the prophecy's urgency. Birch, soft and pale, carried gentle omens of renewal. Blackthorn, dense and splintered, whispered of necessary conflict. Even the direction of the cuts held power. Upward strokes for blessings, downward for warnings, horizontal for the liminal spaces between. Archaeological finds add eerie credence to these traditions. In a peat bog near County Kildare, researchers uncovered a set of 25 Ogham sticks arranged in a perfect circle, their ends charred as if used in some final, fiery divination. Microscopic analysis showed residue of hallucinogenic fungi on several, suggesting the Druids didn't just interpret the sticks, they communed with them. Modern recreations of these rituals yield unsettling results. Volunteers handling exact replicas report sudden temperature shifts in the wood, though scientists attribute this to the body's own electromagnetic field interacting with the unique moisture content of aged timber. Perhaps most haunting is how these relics blur the line between tool and teacher. Some legends speak of Ogham sticks that would warm in the hand when danger neared, their grooves filling with a sticky resin like tree sap. Others tell of rods that sprouted fresh buds years after being cut, as if the prophecy within refused to die. Today, forestry workers in remote parts of Wales still occasionally find strange markings on isolated oaks, fresh carvings in an alphabet supposedly lost for centuries. Whether prank or persistence, the message is clear. The trees haven't forgotten how to speak, and if you press your palm against bark etched with those old, angular lines, you might just feel the faintest pulse, a language not of letters but of living wood. The bull wasn't just an animal to the Druids, it was a living altar, a bridge between earth and sky. and nothing captures this sacred bond more vividly than the silver bull chalices, vessels forged not for drinking but for communion. These weren't mere cups, they were masterpieces of ritual engineering, shaped like bulls with hollow bodies and spouts at the muzzle, designed to pour offerings rather than hold them. The most stunning example, the Rhyton of Tintignac, discovered in a French temple in 2004, gleams with eerie craftsmanship, life-sized and wrought from solid silver. Its horns curve skyward as if in mid-charge, while intricate engravings along its flanks depict constellations, celestial maps guiding the spirit of the sacrifice upward. But why bulls? The answer lies in the Druidic view of the natural world. Bulls symbolized untamed fertility, raw power, and the cyclical nature of life and death. During the festival of Beltane, Druids would lead a sacred bull through bonfires, its hooves scattering embers like stars before a single, precise cut to the throat filled a chalice with its blood. This wasn't wanton slaughter, it was a transfusion of energy. The blood, caught in the silver vessel, was then poured onto fields or mixed with grain as an offering. Modern analysis of soil near Tintignac reveals traces of hemoglobin and silver particles, suggesting the chalices weren't just ceremonial props. They were functional tools, their metal chosen for its antimicrobial properties, preserving the offering's potency. The Rhyton's design reveals even deeper layers. Infrared scans show hidden channels inside the bull's head, designed to aerate the liquid as it poured, creating a frothing effect reminiscent of a bull's breath. Ancient texts describe how this living pour was seen as the animal's spirit escaping into the earth. Some chalices, like one fragment found in Cornwall, feature hinged jaws that could be manipulated during rituals, making the bull appear to speak as liquid streamed from its mouth. The effect would have been hypnotic, a vessel that seemed to breathe, to participate in its own sacrifice. Not all bull chalices held blood. Some, like the smaller bronze specimens found in bogs, contained fermented honey or hallucinogenic infusions. A residue analysis from a Welsh excavation turned up traces of mead laced with wormwood, a concoction likely used to induce visions. These dreaming chalices might have been passed among initiates, each sip deepening their trance as the bull's form wavered in the firelight. The symbolism is potent, drinking from the sacred animal to absorb its wisdom. The fate of these relics is as mysterious as their use. Many were deliberately bent or broken before burial, a practice called killing the vessel to release its spirit. Others, like the Tintignac Rhyton, were hidden with care, wrapped in oak leaves and placed in stone-lined pits, as if waiting to be unearthed in a time when their purpose might be understood anew. Perhaps that time is now. When conservators first lifted the Rhyton, they noted something peculiar. The silver was cold to the touch, unnaturally so, even in summer heat. A quirk of metallurgy, surely, but those who have stood near it in museums swear the air smells faintly of iron and damp soil, as if the bull's last breath still lingers in the metal. And if you listen closely when the crowd's thin, you might just hear the echo of liquid hitting bronze, a sound with no visible source, but one that raises the hairs on your neck. The chalices may sit silent behind glass today, but some vessels refuse to be emptied completely. The chilling whisper of feathers against the wind marked the presence of a Druid seer wrapped in the raven cloak, a garment not woven from cloth but stitched with the very darkness of the battlefield itself. More than just a symbol, these feathered mantles were believed to blur the line between human and divine, allowing the wearer to step into the realm of the Morrigan, the Celtic goddess of war and prophecy. Archaeological evidence from peat bogs in Ireland and Scotland tells a haunting tale. Fragments of raven and crow feathers preserved alongside human remains, their barbs still clinging to traces of a sticky, resin-like substance. This wasn't mere adornment. Lab analysis reveals the adhesive was mixed with crushed hematite, a blood-red iron ore, a deliberate echo of the Morrigan's role as both harbinger of death and guardian of sovereignty. The cloak's construction was a ritual in itself. Historical accounts describe Druids collecting feathers only from birds that died naturally or in battle, never by human hand. Each plume was tied with sinew in intricate, knotted patterns resembling the interlacing wings of a murder of crows. Some cloaks, like the one suggested by remains in County Meath, contained feathers from over 200 birds, an ephemeral tapestry that took lifetimes to assemble. Wearing it wasn't simply about disguise, it was an act of sacred mimicry. Celtic texts speak of seers who donned the cloak before battle, their movements becoming unnervingly avian, heads tilting with bird-like precision, voices fracturing into croaks and clicks. Warriors who witnessed this transformation swore the feathers seemed to ripple even when the air stood still, but the cloak's true power lay in its duality. While the Morrigan was a goddess of carnage, she was also a prophetess. Druid seers would retreat to fog-drenched marshes, wrapping themselves in the feather mantle to interpret omens. The slightest shift in the feathers, a single plume lifting against the wind, or the sudden alignment of dark tips into arrow-like patterns could signal victory or doom. Modern experiments with reconstructed cloaks reveal an eerie phenomenon. Raven feathers, when layered densely, create subtle electrostatic charges in humid environments, causing them to stir without visible cause. To an ancient observer, this would have looked like the cloak itself was alive, pulsing with the goddess's will. One bog discovery in the Hebrides adds a macabre twist. A skeleton dubbed the bird seer was found with feather impressions encircling its neck like a collar, the skull's eye sockets filled with polished raven skulls. Forensic analysis shows the individual died from a single, precise incision to the throat, a wound eerily similar to the sacrificial method used for the Morrigan's sacred bulls. Was this a willing offering, a final transformation into the goddess's service, or a failed attempt to return from the realm of prophecy? The answer may lie in the cloak's most unsettling legacy. Those who wore it too long were said to develop a craving for carrion, their teeth blackening as if stained by raven's blood. Today, ravens still wheel over ancient battlefields, their shadows stitching the earth with fleeting darkness. Perhaps that's why museums display the few surviving feather fragments behind thick glass, not just to preserve them, but to contain whatever whisper of the Morrigan might still cling to those brittle, darkened quills. And if you've ever startled a crow into flight, catching the oily sheen of its wings against the sun, you've felt it too, that primal shudder, that half-remembered sense that something ancient just passed through the world, trailing feathers and prophecy in its wake. The Druids knew better than most. Some disguises aren't meant to hide, they're meant to reveal. The towering wicker man loomed over the gathered crowd, its hollow frame casting skeletal shadows in the twilight, an icon of sacrifice immortalized in Julius Caesar's chilling accounts of Druidic rites. According to his writings, the Gauls constructed colossal figures woven from willow branches, their cavernous bodies filled with living offerings, criminals, prisoners of war, even volunteers seeking divine favor before the entire structure was set ablaze. The screams of the dying, he claimed, were considered auspicious by the Druids, a harrowing exchange of life for fertile harvests or victory in battle. But here's where history fractures. Caesar's description, penned by a conqueror with every reason to vilify his enemies, stands starkly at odds with the physical evidence left behind. Archaeology tells a more nuanced story. Fragments of wicker ritual objects have surfaced from bogs in Denmark to hill forts in Wales, yet none match the scale or horror of Caesar's narrative. The most revealing find came from a peat marsh in East Anglia, where researchers uncovered the remains of a human-sized wicker figure, its chest cavity packed not with bodies, but with bundles of grain, dried herbs, and small animal bones. Carbon dating places it squarely in the Druidic era, yet its purpose seems far gentler, a vessel for symbolic offerings burned to release their essence to the gods. Other sites yielded wicker horns, crowns, and even sandals, objects likely used in initiation rites or seasonal festivals. The disconnect between Caesar's propaganda and the artifacts raises fascinating questions. Was the Wicker Man a Roman exaggeration or a rare, extreme rite reserved for times of crisis? Celtic oral traditions hint at both. Some Irish texts describe straw kings, effigies paraded during droughts or plagues, then ritually dismembered to absorb the community's misfortunes. Others speak of wicker birth tunnels, through which couples would crawl to ensure fertility. The key lies in the material itself. Willow, the primary wood used, was sacred to the Druids for its resilience. Cut a branch and it sprouts anew. This wasn't just destruction, it was cyclical rebirth written in flame. Modern reconstructions shed light on the effigy's possible symbolism. When a team in Brittany built a 15-foot wicker figure based on Celtic designs and set it alight, the burning pattern was revelatory. The flames climbed methodically from the feet upward, the figure appearing to walk into the sky as it burned, a potent metaphor for the soul's journey. Spectrometers analyzing the smoke detected elevated levels of lithium and strontium, elements known to induce calmness in low doses. Could the rite have been less about punishment and more about communal catharsis, a shared release of grief or fear? One haunting discovery in the Orkney Islands blurs the line further. A stone circle there surrounds a fire-scarred pit containing willow fragments twisted into humanoid shapes too small to hold a person, but eerily reminiscent of Caesar's descriptions. Mixed with the charcoal are tiny bone carvings of sheaves and sickles, suggesting a rite tied to harvest rather than war, the most plausible interpretation. The Wicker Man wasn't a single, monstrous tradition, but a multifaceted symbol, one that could represent abundance or atrocity depending on the hands that shaped it. Perhaps the truth lies in the willow's nature. Bend it too harshly and it snaps, guide it gently, and it becomes a vessel for something new. The Druids understood this balance better than most. And if you've ever watched a bonfire's embers twist into the night air, you've glimpsed the same duality: destruction and renewal, terror and wonder, all rising together in the smoke. The Wicker Man's greatest lesson might be this: fire reveals what we bring to it, and history, like willow, remembers the shape of every hand that tries to bend it. Buried in the soft earth of an English barrow, a fist-sized disc of golden amber still hums with the memory of sunlight. The Monkton Farley pendant, discovered near the ruins of a Druidic sanctuary, isn't just jewelry, it's a frozen fragment of solar devotion. Carved with concentric circles resembling the sun's rays and perforated with precise holes to catch the light, this relic offers a glimpse into how the Druids harnessed amber's eerie properties to worship the celestial fire that sustained their world. But amber wasn't chosen for its beauty alone. Rub this resin fossil against wool, as the Druids did, and it crackles to life with static electricity, a phenomenon they interpreted as trapped daylight struggling to escape. The science behind this sunstone only deepens its mystique. Amber, formed over millennia from tree resin, acts as a natural capacitor, storing and releasing energy with friction. Experiments with replicas of the Monkton disc show that when suspended on horsehair cords, as ancient descriptions suggest, it can generate enough charge to make nearby feathers tremble or even lift strands of human hair, effects the Druids likely saw as proof of the sun's invisible hand. But the true genius lies in the disc's design. X-rays reveal that the pendant's holes align with solstice sunrise patterns when hung at specific latitudes. During midsummer ceremonies, sunlight passing through these perforations would cast dancing amber dots across ritual spaces, a celestial clock written in light and shadow. Legends from Wales to Brittany speak of sun traps, amber objects left atop sacred hills to absorb the first and last light of the longest days. These charged relics were then carried into dark ceremonial caves or burial chambers, where their faint glow and crackling discharge would have seemed like fragments of the divine. One Irish myth describes Druid healers placing amber discs on the chests of the sick, believing solar energy could purge illness. Modern tests lend startling credence to this. Amber contains succinic acid, a compound still used in some anti-inflammatory medicines today. The Moncton disk's most haunting feature might be its imperfections. Trapped within its golden depths, barely visible to the naked eye, are microscopic air bubbles from the ancient forest that birthed it. When heated by a priest's hands or the sun's rays, these bubbles would have expanded, creating minuscule pressure changes that made the disk emit faint musical tones, a phenomenon known as thermoacoustics. To worshippers gathered at stone circles, it must have sounded like the sun itself was singing. Other amber solar relics reveal even darker rituals. A shattered disk found in a Dorset burial mound still bears dark stains at its center. Mass spectrometry identified them as blood, likely from sacrifices meant to feed the sun during eclipses. Yet most disks, like the one at Moncton Farleigh, show no such marks. Perhaps they were used in gentler rites, like the Cornish tradition of passing amber beads through new fire smoke to bless them. This duality captures the Druidic sun worship perfectly, a force that could scorch or nourish, destroy or create, all depending on how it was channeled. Today, if you hold real amber up to a strong light, you'll see something the Druids knew intimately, the way it seems to gather brightness deep within, as if hoarding sunlight for darker days. That's no illusion. Amber absorbs ultraviolet light and re-emits it slowly, a property called fluorescence. Walk into any museum after hours, shine a black light on these relics, and watch them glow like captured stars. The Druids didn't need modern science to understand amber's magic. They felt it in the crackle of their fingers, saw it in the way light bent toward these golden discs, and heard it in the whispered songs of a material that refused to forget its origins. And on certain mornings, when the dawn strikes just right through the oak leaves, you might swear you see those old sun traps pulsing once more, not with electricity but with something far older. Memory. Deep in the ancient burial mounds of Britain, where shadows cling to the roots of gnarled yew trees, archaeologists have unearthed staffs that whisper of a journey between worlds. These are no ordinary walking sticks, carved from the heartwood of the poisonous yew, their surfaces etched with spirals mimicking the coils of the underworld. They served as passports for the dead. The most famous example, the Wetwang slack staff, still bears traces of its original purpose, dark stains at its tapered end, identified as a mixture of yew sap and human blood. To the Druids, death wasn't an end, it was a crossing, and these staffs were the ferryman's oars. The choice of yew wood was deliberate. Every part of the tree is lethally toxic, yet its scarlet berries and evergreen needles symbolized eternal life, a paradox that fascinated the Druids. Microscopic analysis of burial staffs reveals a chilling detail. The wood was always harvested from the north side of the tree, where the shadow of death was believed to linger longest. Once carved, the staffs were seasoned in bogs for precisely 13 lunar cycles, absorbing the tannins that preserved both the wood and, symbolically, the soul within. When buried with the dead, they were placed diagonally across the body, pointing northeast, the direction of the Celtic otherworld Annwn. The Wetwang slack discovery in East Yorkshire paints a vivid picture. Found in the grave of a high-ranking Druid priestess, her staff was intricately notched with 24 grooves, one for each year of her life. At its tip, a hollowed-out chamber held a mixture of crushed mistletoe berries and yew pollen, a concoction modern toxicologists confirm would induce near-death visions. This suggests the staff wasn't just a grave good, it was a tool used in life to practice the journey beyond. Ancient texts describe rituals where initiates would grip such staffs while drinking yew-infused brews, their bodies laid in burial poses as their spirits walked the twilight path. But the yew staff's power didn't end at death. Many were deliberately splintered before interment, as if to release their guiding force. Others, like one found in a Welsh cist grave, show peculiar wear patterns at the base, evidence they were ritually struck against standing stones, perhaps to open the doorway to the afterlife. Most haunting are the staffs buried alone, with no human remains. These soul catchers, often discovered near battlefields or plague sites, may have been planted to gather wandering spirits too traumatized to move on. Modern science lends eerie credence to these practices. Wood contains taxine alkaloids that emit measurable electromagnetic pulses when decaying, a phenomenon the Druids could have interpreted as the presence of lingering souls. Even stranger, yew staffs buried in certain mineral-rich soils develop a phosphorescent glow from fungal growth, visible in darkness for decades. Imagine a moonless night in the Iron Age, when mourners returning to a grave might see that faint, greenish pulse through the soil, proof the dead still walked. Today, ancient yews still guard churchyards across Britain, their roots tangled with bones, some bare marks where bark was stripped centuries ago, perhaps for last staffs carved in secret when Druidism faded. And if you press your ear to the trunk of one on a still night, locals swear you can hear it humming not with wind, but with the memory of countless souls who gripped its wood and stepped into the dark, guided by nothing more than faith in a poisoned branch and the hands that carved it. Etched into the weathered face of a Welsh standing stone, 3 delicate rays fan outward like beams of dawn light breaking through mist, the awn symbol, a signature of divine inspiration in Druidic tradition. Unlike the dramatic relics of ceremony or sacrifice, these carvings speak in quiet strokes, yet their influence ripples across millennia. The name itself whispers their purpose, awn, deriving from old Celtic words meaning flowing spirit, the breath of creativity that moved through bards and seers alike. But these 3 lines hold secrets far older than the Druids who revered them. The earliest known example, carved into a passage tomb in Ireland's Boyne Valley, predates Celtic culture by at least 2,000 years, proof that some truths echo through time, waiting to be recognized anew. What makes the awn stones so compelling is their duality. At first glance, the symbol appears simple, 3 parallel lines often capped with dots or enclosed in circles. But archaeological context reveals layers of meaning. Stones bearing this motif frequently mark intersections of ley lines, those mysterious channels of earth energy that fascinated ancient cultures. Others, like the Trefail stone in Pembrokeshire, were positioned so that the equinox sunrise aligns perfectly with the central ray, transforming the carving into a solar conduit for one fleeting moment each year. Modern dowsers who have surveyed these sites report strange magnetic anomalies near the stones, though whether this influenced their placement or resulted from it remains hotly debated. The 3 rays themselves likely represent the Druidic triad of understanding earth, sea, and sky, body, mind, and spirit, or perhaps the 3 phases of the creative spark: inspiration, expression, and integration. Some carvings, like the one hidden in the crypt of a Cornish church, show the lines subtly varied in length, a coded message suggesting that true wisdom comes from balance, not equality. The dots above each stroke, when present, may symbolize the 3 drops of Ceridwen's cauldron from Welsh myth, the source of all poetic gift, won through suffering and transformation. During the 18th century Druid revival, the awn took on new life as a living symbol. Iolo Morganwg, the controversial scholar who helped reconstruct modern Druidry, adopted it as the emblem of his Gorsedd ceremonies. Today, you'll find it tattooed on poets, cast in silver pendants, even projected onto stages at Welsh music festivals, but the ancient stones still hold mysteries. Infrared scans of the Cerrig y Goff monument revealed previously unseen awn carvings beneath lichen, each stroke precisely 1 thumb width apart, matching the exact measurements of similar symbols found as far away as the Scottish Isles. This wasn't random artistry, it was a sacred geometry passed down through generations of stone scribes. Perhaps most intriguing are the accounts of medieval monks who, despite their distrust of pagan symbols, described certain awn stones as singing when struck with specific types of rock. Modern acoustics testing at Penta Ifan confirms this. The recumbent stones resonate at frequencies that activate the inner ear's vestibular system, inducing mild trance states in those standing nearby. Combine this with the fact that many awn carvings face westward toward the setting sun and the Celtic otherworld, and you begin to grasp their power. These weren't just markings, they were tuning forks for the soul, aligning human consciousness with rhythms older than memory. In a secluded grove near Snowdonia, one weathered stone bears an awn symbol unlike any other. Its rays curve like tendrils of smoke, seeming to move when viewed from different angles. Local lore claims it was carved by Myrddin himself, the bard who would later morph into the Merlin of Arthurian legend. Whether true or not, the stone embodies the awn's ultimate lesson. Inspiration isn't found in straight lines or easy answers, but in the shimmering space between what's carved and what's felt, between history's certainty and imagination's endless horizon. Like the first glimmer of an idea not yet formed into words, these ancient stones remind us that some truths are best understood sideways, in glimpses, as the light shifts and the world turns. Standing sentinel in the sacred groves of the ancient Celts, the twin oak pillars weren't just trees, they were thresholds. Greek historian Strabo described these colossal trunks, stripped of branches and carved with spiraling Ogham, marking the entrance to sanctuaries where the earth breathed with the gods. But what made these paired oaks so potent? Archaeology offers a clue. At sites like Flag Fen in England, researchers uncovered rows of oak postholes arranged with celestial precision, their wood preserved for millennia in waterlogged soil. These weren't random placements. Each pillar stood exactly 7 times its width apart, a sacred ratio echoing the 7-year cycle of Druidic training. The twin pillars' design reveals a deeper purpose. Unlike solitary standing stones, these oaks functioned as a gateway, literally and symbolically. Strabo notes initiates passed between them to shed their old lives, a ritual mirrored in the alignment of Flagfen's posts toward the winter solstice sunrise. Carbon dating shows something astonishing. Many paired oaks were planted simultaneously, their roots intertwined underground long before they were carved. This wasn't just botany, it was a living metaphor for the Druidic belief in interconnectedness. Modern laser scans of surviving pillar bases, like those at home next the sea, show intricate carvings facing inward, hidden messages meant only for those crossing between. Some depict twin serpents winding upward, a motif also found on ceremonial staffs. Others bear knots that, when viewed from a specific angle at dawn, cast shadows forming Bindrune's magical symbols of protection. The pillar's spacing wasn't arbitrary either. Acoustic testing reveals that chants uttered between them created eerie harmonic echoes, amplifying sound in a way that mimicked the Druid's legendary voice of the oak. But the most haunting discovery came from a bog near Niederdola, Germany. There, 2 oak pillars flanked a platform holding 9 intricately woven willow baskets, each containing sacrificial offerings of grain, amber, and in one case the skull of a fox. Dendrochronology dated the oaks to precisely 54 years old when felled, matching the Druidic age of wisdom. The fox skull's placement suggests the pillars also served as guardians, its spirit believed to ward off deceit during rituals. What truly chills the blood is how these relics persist. In Cornwall's St. Nectan's Glen, twin oaks still grow where medieval monks claimed Druids once worshipped. Their bark, when examined, shows unnatural spiral patterns, not carvings, but growth distortions caused by copper bands fastened centuries ago and long since absorbed by the living wood. The message is clear: some thresholds were never meant to close, and if you stand between those trees at twilight, you might still feel it, the old, silent pull of roots reaching for roots, of pillars that remember when they were more than trees. Beneath the flickering torchlight of a French monastery in the late 19th century, a farmer's plough struck something far older than Christianity, a fractured bronze tablet etched with strange, looping characters. These were the Coligny fragments, the most complete surviving record of the Druid's celestial intellect. But this wasn't just a calendar, it was a bronze moon plaque, a 5-foot-wide mosaic of timekeeping so precise it could predict eclipses and harmonize the erratic lunar cycles with the steady march of seasons. The Druids didn't just track time, they conversed with it. The plaque's design reveals a mind-bending complexity. Unlike modern calendars with their rigid months, the Coligny system wove together two parallel timelines, one following the moon's 29.5-day cycle, the other aligned with the solar year. To bridge the gap, the Druids inserted extra months at precise intervals, a feat of mathematical grace that kept their festivals in sync with the land's rhythms. The bronze surface, once gilded with gold inlay to mark sacred days, divided time into lucky and unlucky periods, each denoted by intricate glyphs resembling crescent moons and radiating suns. Modern astronomers have run simulations using the plaque's algorithms and found them accurate to within hours over a 60-year span. What truly astonishes is how the Druids encoded celestial events into metal. Certain sequences of punched holes along the tablet's edge correspond to major lunar standstills, the points where the moon pauses in its wanderings before reversing course. These events, occurring only every 18 years, were central to Druidic prophecy. By sliding bone pegs into these holes, priests could simulate decades of lunar motion, anticipating moments when the moon's path would mirror that of long-dead ancestors. The plaque wasn't just a tool, it was a bronze oracle whispering the sky's secrets to those who knew how to listen. The fragments also exposed the visceral link between time and ritual. Next to the month labeled Cernunnos, our modern October/November, archaeologists found residue of hawthorn sap, a sacred substance used during Samhain when the veil between worlds grew thin. This wasn't arbitrary. The Coligny calendar marks Samhain not as a single night, but a 3-day tide when lunar and solar energies briefly balanced. Similar residues cluster around Beltane and Imbolc, proof that the plaque didn't just track time, it ritualized it, turning celestial mechanics into lived experience. Recent discoveries add darker layers. X-rays revealed hidden subtext scratched beneath the visible markings, a secondary shadow calendar tracking 99-year cycles. This matches Celtic myths of a great year when history was said to repeat. One chilling section near the plaque's lower edge shows a cluster of glyphs resembling the Orn symbol. Clustered around a date modern scholars correlate with the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 A. Had the Druids, continents away, sensed the disaster through some celestial calculus. Today, the Coligny fragments rest in Lyon's Gallo-Roman Museum, their bronze surface dulled by centuries. But on the summer solstice, if sunlight strikes them at just the right angle, those ancient glyphs flare to life for a heartbeat, golden once more. It's a fleeting reminder that time, to the Druids, wasn't a straight line. It was a spiral, winding ever upward, with each turn echoing the last. And if you press your ear close to the glass, past the muffled voices of tourists, you might almost hear the whisper of bronze fingers tracing the grooves, counting down to some celestial appointment we've long forgotten how to keep. Buried in the dark soil of boundary ditches and beneath the doorways of ancient longhouses, archaeologists have uncovered relics that hum with unsettling purpose: horse skulls, their jaws wired shut with rusted bronze, their hollowed craniums filled with pebbles and teeth. When shaken, these macabre instruments became the horse skull rattles, tools of sonic warfare against the unseen. Unlike ceremonial drums or melodic bone flutes, these artifacts served one primal function: to terrify. The Celts believed malevolent spirits traveled along boundary lines, and nothing sent them fleeing like the clatter of 1,000 teeth tumbling inside a dead beast's skull. The craftsmanship of these rattles reveals layers of ritual intent. Forensic analysis shows the skulls weren't just scavenged. They came from horses carefully selected for their color. Dappled grays and pure whites dominate the archaeological record, then slaughtered in autumn when the veil between worlds was thin. The brains were removed through the spinal opening, a painstaking process ensuring the cranium remained intact. Then came the transformation. Tiny holes drilled along the jawline allowed bronze wires to lace the mandible shut, while the interior became a chamber for noisemakers, river stones, wolf teeth, even shards of shattered mirrors. the latter thought to repel spirits by reflecting their own corruption. Folklore preserves their use in the hoodening traditions of Britain, where costumed processions carried horse skulls door to door during winter solstices. Villagers would pay in bread or ale to have the rattles shaken above their thresholds, a payment not for entertainment but protection. The sound was deliberately jarring acoustic tests with reconstructed rattles register at frequencies that trigger mammalian fight or flight responses. To an ancient ear, it wasn't just noise, it was the auditory equivalent of a blazing torch thrust into darkness. Boundary ditches yield the most haunting finds. At a site near Hadrian's Wall, 7 horse skulls were unearthed in a perfect semicircle, their rattles facing outward as if guarding some invisible perimeter. Soil analysis revealed traces of yew berries and mistletoe paste smeared on the skull's substances known for their purifying properties. But the real revelation came when researchers noticed the pebbles inside weren't local. They'd been carried from coastal regions over 100 miles away, their smoothness meticulously graded for consistent acoustics. This wasn't haphazard magic, it was sonic engineering. Modern experiments shed light on why horse skulls were chosen. When suspended and struck, they resonate at a frequency that interferes with infrasound, the ultra-low vibrations linked to paranormal experiences. Combine this with the disorienting rattle of stones, and you have a tool that didn't just scare spirits. It disrupted the very energy they were thought to inhabit. Farmers in the Orkney Islands still hang horse skulls in barns during storms, insisting the old ways keep the trow's mischievous spirits at bay. Science might call it superstition. But stand in a drafty stable at midnight when the wind makes those ancient bones tremble, and you'll understand why the Druids believed some doors needed more than a lock. They needed a scream. In the hushed shade of sacred hazel groves, where sunlight dappled through leaves like scattered coins, the Druids sought a relic small enough to cradle in a child's palm, yet potent enough to contain the cosmos. The hazel nut of wisdom wasn't just a seed. It was a vessel of primordial knowledge, tied to the legend of the salmon of knowledge who fed on falling hazelnuts in the mystic well of Segais. Celtic lore tells of how the salmon gained all the world's wisdom from these very nuts, and how the hero Fionn mac Cumhaill accidentally absorbed that knowledge by burning his thumb while cooking the fish. But archaeology suggests this myth was more than a parable. Burnt hazelnut shells by the thousands have surfaced at ritual sites from the Boyne Valley to the Scottish Highlands, their charred surfaces telling a story of deliberate, sacred consumption. Excavations at a ceremonial cooking pit in County Meath reveal something startling. The nuts weren't merely roasted, they were destroyed. Carbonized fragments show extreme overheating, far beyond what's needed to make them edible. This aligns with ancient texts describing a ritual called the cracking of wisdom, where hazelnuts were burned to blackened husks before being ground into a bitter paste and mixed with fermented berries. Modern chemists analyzing residue from these sites identified traces of homolar alkaloids, compounds known to enhance memory retention. The Druids, it seems, weren't just eating nuts. They were chemically unlocking them, transforming simple seeds into something far more potent. The hazel's sacred status went beyond its fruit. Dendrochronology of preserved wooden artifacts shows hazel wands were the preferred tool for divination, their supple wood capable of holding intricate Ogham carvings without splintering. At a bog site in Connemara, archaeologists found 9 hazel rods arranged in a spiral, each carved with a different segment of the salmon myth. When assembled in sequence under moonlight, the shadows cast by the rods formed the shape of a leaping fish, a literal illumination of hidden knowledge. But the most haunting discovery comes from a cave system beneath the hill of Tara. There, nestled in a crevice too narrow for an adult to reach, rested a child-sized leather pouch containing 7 hazelnuts, each pierced by a single thorn. Radiocarbon dating places them squarely in the Druidic era, while DNA analysis confirmed they came from a single, now extinct variety of hazel cultivated solely on sacred ground. The nut's positioning, one at the center, 6 surrounding it, mirrors the Pleiades star cluster as it appeared during the spring equinox 2,000 years ago. Were these celestial seeds offerings to the heavens, or perhaps the remnants of an initiation rite where young acolytes ingested wisdom under the watch of the stars? Modern science offers a tantalizing clue. Hazelnuts are among the richest natural sources of choline, a nutrient critical for brain development. Combined with the alkaloids found in ritual residues, they could have induced a state of hyper-awareness, explaining the flash of knowing described in so many Celtic epics. Yet the Druids likely saw it as something far grander, the moment when the crackle of a burning shell released not just smoke but understanding itself. Today, scattered hazel trees still grow near ancient wells and crumbling stone circles. Their nuts ripen and fall just as they did for the salmon in the old tales. And if you're quiet, if you crush a husk between your fingers and breathe in that earthy, slightly sweet scent, you might catch the barest whisper of what the Druids knew. That wisdom isn't found in books or scrolls, but in the silent language of roots and rivers, and in the stubborn belief that even the smallest seed can crack open the universe. Drenched in the deep crimson hues of oxidized iron, the Tarot stone stands as a silent sentinel of the Druids' most sobering rites. This dome-shaped granite altar, carved with intricate Celtic spirals, isn't just a work of art. Its pitted surface tells a darker story. Forensic archaeologists scanning the stone with X-ray fluorescence made a chilling discovery. Concentrated iron deposits in the grooves between carvings, matching the blood residue patterns found on ancient sacrificial blades. This wasn't mere weathering. The stone had been a stage for offerings where the line between reverence and reckoning blurred into the rock itself. The Tarot stone's design reveals its purpose with unsettling clarity. Unlike standing stones erected for celestial alignment, this relic sits low and wide, its curved top forming a natural basin that channels liquids toward a single carved spiral at its center. Modern experiments with pig's blood, a common archaeological substitute, show the spiral acts as a drain directing offerings downward into the earth, a literal communion with the soil. Surrounding this central motif, 4 smaller spirals align with the cardinal directions, suggesting sacrifices weren't random but tied to seasonal cycles. Soil samples taken beneath the stone contain traces of charred barley and human hemoglobin, a grim recipe for harvest rituals where life fed life in an unbroken chain. What separates the Tarot stone from ordinary altars is its material. The granite contains exceptionally high concentrations of magnetite, a naturally magnetic iron oxide. When exposed to blood's iron content, the stone's surface creates weak electrochemical reactions enough to produce visible heat signatures under infrared cameras. To witnesses gathered in torchlight, the altar may have appeared to drink the offerings, the moisture vanishing quicker than nature could explain. Even more haunting are the microscopic wear patterns along the spiral's edges, indicating repeated scrubbing with a mixture of salt and juniper, an ancient cleansing method still used in modern forensic cleanups. Comparative archaeology paints a fuller picture. Similar bloodstones have been found across Celtic lands, from the Gaulish sanctuaries of France to the Welsh mountain shrines. The Lydney Park stone in Gloucestershire bears identical iron residue, while the Calladia's altar in Ireland shows wear patterns from ropes suggesting restraining methods. Yet the Tarot stone stands apart. Its carvings include a rare 5th spiral hidden on the underside, only visible when the stone is tilted, depicting a serpent swallowing its tail. This Ouroboros symbol, typically associated with eternal cycles, here takes on a darker tone. X-rays reveal the hidden spiral's grooves contain traces of nightshade alkaloids, implying some offerings were sedated before the final cut. Modern forensic techniques allow us to reconstruct these rituals with eerie precision. Blood spatter analysis suggests most victims or willing participants knelt facing north, their throats exposed toward the stone's apex. The iron patterns indicate swift, precise cuts to the jugular, with the arterial spray intentionally directed along the carving's paths. Some researchers argue this wasn't mere brutality. The specific angles created harmonic vibrations in the stone, detectable by sensitive equipment today. When replicated with sound frequencies matching a dying human heartbeat, the Tarot stone emits infrasound waves known to induce trance states in observers. The most unsettling revelation came in 2018 when a storm toppled the stone temporarily, exposing its long-buried base. There, archaeologists found 9 human molars wedged into the rock's natural fissures, each tooth showing signs of deliberate removal prior to death. Dental analysis dated them to different centuries, proving the altar's use spanned generations. One molar contained a tiny bronze bead, possibly a soul anchor to tether spirits to the site. It's a ghoulish detail that raises more questions than answers. Were these sacrifices voluntary initiates, enemies of the tribe, or something more complex, individuals who crossed the boundary between victim and priest in their final moments? Today, the Tarot stone sits placidly in a County Galway field, its crimson stains faded to rust-colored whispers under centuries of rain. But on humid summer nights, when the air hangs thick and still, visitors report an iron scent lingering around the carvings, as if the stone exhales the memory of what it witnessed. Local farmers insist their dogs still circle it warily, ears flattened, long before human eyes can see the morning mist curling through those ancient spirals like ghostly offerings returning to the sky. The Druids understood something modern science is only beginning to grasp. Stone isn't just a witness to history. Under the right conditions, it becomes an archive, one that occasionally, chillingly breathes. Bent under the weight of centuries but still shining with undimmed majesty, the golden talks of the Druids whisper of power that transcended mere adornment. These intricate neck rings, like those found in the legendary Snettisham hoard, weren't jewelry as we understand it. They were molten sunlight given form, physical manifestations of a ruler's covenant with the gods. The heaviest examples could weigh over 2 pounds of pure gold, engineered with such precision that modern jewelers still debate how Iron Age craftsmen achieved their seamless twists without modern tools. To wear one wasn't just a display of wealth, it was to carry the literal weight of sovereignty upon your collarbones, a constant reminder that leadership demanded both strength and surrender. The Snettisham treasures reveal the talk's secret language through their construction. X-ray fluorescence scans show the gold was deliberately alloyed with trace amounts of meteoritic iron, not for structural integrity, but because the Druids believed metal from the stars carried celestial authority. Each twist in the elaborate design corresponded to lunar cycles. The famous buffer talk from Norfolk contains exactly 29.5 twists, mirroring the days between full moons. This wasn't arbitrary decoration. When worn, these spirals would catch firelight in sequence as the wearer moved, creating a rippling effect that made the metal appear liquid, a visual representation of the flowing energy between king and cosmos. Archaeology confirms the talk's sacred role through their discovery contexts. Many, like the ones at Snettisham, were buried in groups of 3, a sacred Druidic number, often arranged to form perfect triangles with one talk pointing north. Soil analysis near these hoards reveals elevated levels of burnt barley and mead residue, suggesting ceremonial offerings accompanied their burial. Some show microscopic wear patterns indicating they weren't worn daily, but reserved for rituals where the ruler became a living conduit between realms. The most revealing clue comes from the talk terminals, the decorated ends that met at the throat. Several bear tiny, deliberate nicks from blades, evidence of a ritual where the ruler's blood anointed the metal to awaken its power. The talk's design held deeper psychological impacts than modern observers might guess. Anthropologists studying replica talks noted how their weight forces the wearer to hold their head at a precise angle, chin slightly elevated, gaze steady, creating an immediate aura of authority. The pressure against the vagus nerve, which regulates calm and focus, may have literally steadied the ruler's voice during critical pronouncements. Even the metal's temperature played a role. Gold quickly adopts body heat, making the talk feel like a second skin rather than foreign metal, a visceral symbol of kingship becoming inseparable from the self. Yet for all their splendor, these golden collars carried a dark duality. Celtic law decreed that a talk could only be removed by its giver. Usually the high Druid, meaning deposed rulers, often went to their death still wearing them. The infamous broken talk from Suffolk shows signs of having been violently wrenched apart, its twisted terminals telling a silent tale of interrupted power. Other hoards contained talks deliberately bent before burial, a practice scholars call decommissioning, rendering the sacred object inert before returning it to the earth. Today, when museum lights hit these relics at just the right angle, something extraordinary happens. The gold doesn't just gleam, it seems to pulse with a slow, rhythmic glow, as if echoing the heartbeat of those who once wore them. Visitors often report an inexplicable urge to touch their own throats when viewing them, a subconscious recognition of the weight these rulers carried. The talks outlasted empires, outshone generations, and now rest behind glass. But their true message endures. Real power isn't taken. It's bestowed, born, and sometimes brutally reclaimed by the gods who gave it. Julius Caesar's chilling account of the Druids paints them as masters of forbidden knowledge, scribes who committed their entire religious doctrine to memory, forbidding written records except on one material, birch bark. These fragile scrolls, mentioned in his Commentarii de Bello Gallico, supposedly contained the darkest and most powerful incantations of the Celtic world. Yet not a single example survives today, leaving us to wonder, were they deliberately destroyed to protect their secrets, or did time simply erase them like whispers in the wind? The answer might lie in a handful of rare, cryptic artifacts that defy the centuries. Take the Chamelier's tablet, unearthed from a sacred spring in central France. This slender piece of birch bark, no larger than a playing card, bears a Gaulish curse scribbled in delicate Ogham-like strokes. Translators have pieced together phrases like, "I bind you, Lugus, to my will," and "as this bark blackens, so too shall their breath fail." But here's what makes it extraordinary. The words aren't inked, they're scratched into the bark with a fingernail, a technique described in Irish myths as the surest way to make a curse stick. Forensic analysis reveals traces of human saliva in the grooves, suggesting the scroll was licked during the ritual, literally ingesting the magic. The Druids didn't just write their spells, they breathed life into them. Contrast this with Caesar's lost birch archives. Roman historians claimed these scrolls held the names of every god and demon, along with star charts predicting calamities centuries in advance. If true, their destruction wasn't just vandalism, it was cosmic censorship. Yet archaeology hints at a more nuanced reality. At a waterlogged site in East Anglia, researchers found birch fragments pressed into the shape of scrolls, their surfaces too decayed to read but their edges singed. This matches Celtic accounts of burning knowledge to release it to the gods. Perhaps the Druids never meant these texts to endure. Like Buddhist sand mandalas, their power lay in their fleeting nature. The Chamelier's tablet offers another clue. Multispectral imaging revealed faint, erased markings beneath the curse, a palimpsest of older incantations. This wasn't reuse, it was layering, a practice described in Welsh triads where each spell amplified the last. Modern linguists liken it to a spiritual palimpsest where every prayer left a ghost in the fibers. So why birch? The tree's symbolism runs deep. Its white bark represented purity, yet its sap contains bitumen, a compound toxic to fungi and bacteria, a natural preservative. Scrolls buried in bogs or hung in oak groves would last just long enough to serve their purpose before returning to the earth. One fragment, found coiled inside a bronze tube in the Rhineland, takes this further. Its inner layers, protected from light, retain legible Ogham describing the path between the three worlds. But here's the twist, the outer layers are blank. This wasn't a scroll meant to be unrolled, it was a sacred Russian doll of knowledge where only the worthy would peel deep enough to find the truth. The birch bark's true legacy might be its silence. Unlike stone or metal, it carried words meant to dissolve like morning mist, urgent, ephemeral, and alive. And if you've ever pressed your ear to a birch trunk on a still day, you might swear you hear the faintest rustle, as if 1,000 scrolls are still turning their unseen pages in the wind. Among the most enigmatic relics of the Druids lay discs of polished darkness, black mirrors crafted from jet or obsidian, their surfaces so flawless they seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. These weren't decorative pieces but portals. When Roman historian Lucan described Druid seers peering into the abyss of stone, he wasn't speaking metaphorically. Excavations at Anglesey and the Lynn Peninsula have uncovered these mirrors in ritual contexts, often placed atop woven grass mats in underground chambers, positioned precisely where groundwater seepage would create a veil of mist above their surfaces. To gaze into one wasn't just an act of divination, it was a descent into the Celtic otherworld, a realm where time coiled like smoke and the future pooled like ink. The craftsmanship of these mirrors defies their simplicity. Obsidian specimens sourced from volcanic deposits hundreds of miles away were ground to optical smoothness using quartz sand and deer leather, a process taking up to 300 hours per disc. Jet mirrors carved from fossilized monkey puzzle tree resin found along Britain's eastern cliffs show even more deliberate artistry. Microscopic analysis reveals their backs were often etched with spiral patterns invisible to the naked eye, detectable only by fingertips tracing the grooves in darkness. This tactile dimension suggests the mirrors were used blindfolded, their secrets revealed through touch as much as sight. Modern experiments with reconstructed mirrors reveal their unsettling efficacy. Under controlled conditions matching Iron Age torchlight, obsidian discs produce the Troxler effect, a visual phenomenon where staring at a featureless dark surface causes hallucinations as the brain fabricates patterns. Combine this with rhythmic chanting as described in Irish texts, and the effect intensifies, generating vivid imagery of faces, animals, or landscapes. The Druids likely interpreted these visions as communications from the Anon, the otherworld believed to exist parallel to our own, but the mirrors had a darker function too. Welsh triads speak of black scrying to expose enemies, a practice corroborated by a jet mirror found in Dorset, its edges stained with a toxic paste of belladonna and hemlock. Applied to the eyelids before gazing, this concoction would induce pupil dilation and heightened suggestibility, making the visions unbearably vivid. The connection to later medieval scrying practices is undeniable, yet with a crucial distinction. Christian-era crystal gazers sought to divine God's will, but Druid mirrors accessed something wilder, the raw, untamed consciousness of the land itself. A 14th-century monk's account describes finding a Druidic obsidian disc beneath Glastonbury Abbey, its surface still smouldering with unseen fires after centuries. When he dared look into it, he claimed to see not angels or saints, but a great stag crowned with holly, and behind him a forest that had no end. Perhaps the most haunting discovery came from a peat bog in County Offaly, where archaeologists unearthed a jet mirror clutched in the skeletonized hands of a young woman. The artifact bore no carvings, but under ultraviolet light, faint fingerprints emerged around its rim, not from the deceased, but from countless others who'd held it before her. The Druids understood what modern physics confirms: polished stone never truly forgets a touch. And if you press your palm to one of these mirrors today in some museum vault, you might just feel the echo of all those who peered into the dark before you, their breath still fogging the glass across 2,000 years. In the heart of Ireland's misty Midlands, a flame burned for centuries without ever turning to ash. The eternal flame of Brigid, tended first by white-robed Druid priestesses, then later by red-cloaked Christian nuns. This wasn't just fire, it was a living thread stitching together two worlds, two faiths across the razor's edge of history. At the sacred site of Kildare, its name meaning Church of the Oak, the flame's origins stretch back to a time when fire was less a tool than a tongue, a way for the earth to speak. The Druids knew fire as the purest expression of Brigid, the triple goddess of healing, poetry, and smithcraft. Her flames didn't merely warm flesh, they forged destinies. And the secret to their endurance might lie not in magic, but in the very bones of the land itself. Geothermal activity beneath Kildare's soil offers a tantalizing clue. Natural gas vents, common in Ireland's limestone-rich bedrock, can feed flames indefinitely with seepages of methane. Archaeological surveys near the original flame site reveal fissures in the stone floor of the ancient sanctuary, perfect channels for subterranean gases to rise. The Druids likely discovered this phenomenon by accident, watching a lightning-struck blaze defy the rain. What seemed eternal to worshippers may have been a brilliant harnessing of geology, a marriage of devotion and earthly mechanics. Christian scribes later dismissed the flame's longevity as devilish trickery, but modern gas detectors have confirmed faint methane readings in Kildare's old temple grounds even today. The flame's transition from pagan to Christian stewardship reads like a parable of cultural survival. When the nuns of St. Brigid's Monastery took over the site in the 5th century, they didn't extinguish the fire, they sanctified it. 19 nuns, echoing the Druidic moon calendar's 19-year cycle, took shifts tending the blaze in a rotunda of woven willow, mirroring the Druids' sacred grove architecture. For 1,000 years the flame burned, its meaning rewritten but its essence unchanged. The Christian Brigid retained her pagan predecessor's attributes, keeper of hearths, protector of childbirth, proving some symbols are too potent to erase. What truly chills the blood are the accounts of the flame's behavior. Medieval chronicles describe it burning without fuel, its heatless glow failing to scorch cloth draped over it. Scientists now suspect these were effects of gas composition. Methane burns cleaner and cooler than wood fires, but to witnesses it was proof of divinity. The flame's eventual extinguishing in the 16th century under Protestant suppression feels like a wound in the historical record, until you learn of the whispers from nearby cottages. Oral traditions speak of embers smuggled into hearths, glowing for generations in secret. Today, a modern flame burns again in Kildare, lit in 1993 by Buddhist monks, a fitting homage to a fire that always defied boundaries. The old temple's foundations still exhale traces of gas when the rain comes, as if the earth remembers its ancient pact. And if you visit at dusk, when the new flame's shadow dances on the old stones, you might just hear the echo of two sets of footsteps, sandaled and slippered, walking the same sacred circuit, bound by a light that refused to die. The Druids didn't choose their sacred materials at random. Every oak, sliver of gold, and alignment with the stars was a deliberate conversation with forces beyond human understanding. Trees weren't just resources, they were kin. The oak's roots delved into the underworld, its trunk stood firm in the mortal realm, and its branches brushed the heavens. This vertical axis mirrored the Druidic cosmos, making oaks natural altars, but it wasn't merely symbolism. Dendrochronology reveals ritual oaks were often grown from acorns planted during lunar eclipses, their growth rings showing unnaturally symmetrical patterns, evidence of meticulous cultivation. When a Druid harvested mistletoe with a golden sickle, they weren't just collecting medicine, they were plucking a piece of the sky tangled in earthly bark, a fusion of celestial and terrestrial power. Metals, too, pulsed with meaning. Gold's resistance to tarnish made it a vessel for the eternal, while iron's magnetic pull tied it to the unseen currents of the earth. The Druids' aversion to iron in sacred spaces wasn't superstition, it was practical metaphysics. Geophysicists studying Celtic sanctuaries note that iron tools disrupt the natural geomagnetic fields at sites like Stonehenge, where the stones themselves amplify telluric energy. Bronze, though softer, harmonized with these forces. A torque spiral wasn't just art. It was a coil tuned to the land's vibrations, its gold alloyed with meteoritic iron to bind wearers to both Earth and cosmos. Celestial bodies dictated the rhythm of rituals. The Coligny calendar's precision interweaving lunar months and solar years wasn't mere timekeeping. It was a choreography for when to plant, harvest, and commune. At Beltane, fires blazed to mimic the sun's growing strength, while Samhain's extinguishing flames welcomed the dark half of the year. Archaeologists find proof in charred post holes arranged like constellations, and in the charred grains left at hill forts, always in quantities divisible by 9, the sacred number of completion. Seasonal ceremonies weren't abstract, they were survival codified as worship. The winter slaughter of bulls, their blood channeled into bronze chalices, wasn't just sacrifice, it was a nutrient transfer, returning to the soil what the herd had taken. Spring's hazelnut rites coincided with the salmon runs, linking wisdom to nature's abundance. Even the wicker man, often mischaracterized as a mere effigy of terror, was a recycling of life. Straw from the last harvest holding seeds for the next, burned to ash to fertilize fields. The relics endure as fractured mirrors of this worldview. A Rowan wand's static charge, a black mirror's hallucinatory depths, a yew staff's toxic embrace, each was a lens focusing the wildness of the world into something a human hand could hold. And if we listen closely, the land still whispers their purpose. Stand in a grove of old oaks at dawn, and you'll feel it. The old, unbroken thread between root and star, between what's buried and what burns. Beneath the layers of modern farmland and dense forest, whispers persist of relics still waiting to be found, objects so powerful or so sacred that the Druids hid them beyond the reach of time itself. Among the most tantalizing is the legendary Druid's egg, a relic mentioned in Pliny's writings as a glassy orb formed from the spit of entwined serpents, capable of granting victory in legal disputes or healing mortal wounds. While most surviving serpent eggs in museums are polished stones or crafted glass, believers argue the true artifact remains undiscovered, perhaps buried in a waterlogged grove or concealed within the walls of a long-forgotten shrine. The recent discovery of a lead scroll in a French cave, inscribed with a Druidic curse and a cryptic reference to the egg's nest, has reignited searches in the Ogham region, where thermal springs match ancient descriptions of serpent-gathering sites. Anglesey, the Druidic stronghold famously razed by the Romans, continues to yield clues. In 2019, LiDAR scans revealed the ghostly outlines of circular groves beneath the island's surface, perfectly spaced rings of post holes suggesting structures once used for rituals or relic storage. Excavations at one site uncovered a bronze chest filled with burnt hazelnuts and a single, palm-sized stone carved with serpent scales, fueling speculation that it might be a map stone pointing to larger treasures. Local lore speaks of a cavern system beneath Holyhead Mountain where the last high priests supposedly fled with their most sacred objects, including the fabled silver tear of Mona, a drop-shaped relic said to contain the distilled wisdom of the Druids. Divers exploring underwater caves nearby report strange spherical shadows on sonar, though shifting tides and unstable rock have prevented recovery. The hunt isn't confined to Wales. In the Black Forest of Germany, archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar detected a submerged wooden structure matching descriptions of a Druidic memory temple, where oral traditions were preserved in carved oak panels. Though the site remains unexcavated due to preservation concerns, spectral imaging suggests the remains of a central podium, possibly the resting place of the lost oak throne, a seat carved from a single lightning-struck tree, said to grant visions to those who sat upon it. Elsewhere, in the bogs of County Meath, peat cutters stumbled upon a leather satchel containing 9 birch bark scrolls, their runes fading to invisibility upon exposure to air. Multispectral analysis later revealed phrases like "the mirror beneath the roots" and where the bull's blood meets the moon, sparking theories about hidden chambers near the Hill of Tara. Technology is rewriting the search. Advances in pollen analysis have pinpointed the locations of long-vanished sacred groves by identifying concentrations of mistletoe and oak pollen in soil cores. In Cornwall, drones equipped with thermal cameras have mapped the faint heat signatures of buried stone altars, their surfaces carved with Ogham too fine for the naked eye. Yet for all our tools, some truths may stay buried. The Druids were masters of misdirection, their relics hidden not just in earth but in plain sight. That moss-covered standing stone in a Scottish sheep field, it might be a marker. That oddly symmetrical depression in an Irish hillside, it could be a collapsed ritual shaft. The greatest mystery isn't where these objects lie, but why they still call to us. Perhaps it's the thrill of the hunt, or maybe it's something older. A flicker of recognition when we walk past certain trees or stones, a half-remembered whisper from a time when the world was alive in ways we've forgotten. The relics are out there, silent and patient, waiting for the right light, the right hand, the right moment to step back into the story. And when they do, they won't just rewrite history. They'll remind us that some threads of the past were never truly cut, just coiled like serpents in the dark, dreaming of the sun. From the golden sickle that harvested moonlight to the whispering yew staffs guiding souls into the afterlife, the 25 sacred relics of the Druids paint a portrait of a people who saw no divide between science and spirit. Each artifact, whether the roaring stone of destiny or the serpent-twined torque belt that blurred the lines between human and divine, was a masterclass in ingenuity. The Druids weren't just mystics murmuring incantations in the woods. They were keen observers of nature's hidden rhythms, harnessing static electricity with Rowan wands, amplifying starlight with amber discs, and even encoding celestial math into bronze calendars. Their relics were tools of transformation, each one a key to understanding a world where every oak grove hummed with energy and every phase of the moon held coded instructions for living. What's most striking isn't just the diversity of these objects, but the way they reflect a holistic worldview. The black mirrors weren't mere divination tools. They were early experiments in psychology, exploiting the brain's tendency to find patterns in darkness. The wicker man, far from a simple effigy of sacrifice, was a lesson in cyclical renewal, its ashes nourishing the soil like a primal compost. Even the humblest hazelnut, burned to bitter paste, became a vessel for memory-enhancing chemistry. This was a culture that didn't just worship nature. They reverse-engineered its secrets, blending botany, metallurgy, and astronomy into a single sacred science. As we close this journey through the Druids' lost legacy, consider which relic resonated with you most. Was it the chilling practicality of the horse skull rattles, their sonic warfare against the unseen? Or perhaps the golden torques, their weight a literal embodiment of sovereignty's burden? Maybe it was the birch bark scrolls, their fleeting existence a reminder that some truths are too potent to be set in stone. Share your thoughts below, because the true magic of these relics lies not just in their history, but in the conversations they spark across centuries. The Druids may be gone, but their legacy lingers wherever we dare to look at the natural world, not as a resource, but as a teacher. And if you listen closely to the wind through the oaks, you might just hear the echo of an old question: what other ancient wonders are waiting to be remembered?